before we begin, I just wanted to remind everyone, because this is an oral history creating event, we are recording, and we ask that nobody else do any recording. No photographs, no audio recording. And we are insisting, please, that phones be turned to silent. Thank you very much. Welcome everyone to the event and the Church of the Trinity performance space. I'd like to acknowledge we're on Kaurna land, always was, always will be, and we pay our respects to elders past and present. Desert Voices, cameleer descendants share their Afghan outback stories is an South Australia History Festival 2025 event project conceived by the historian Pamela Rajkowski, OAM. There she is, waving in the corner. Afghan cameleer descendants today proudly acknowledge South Asian, European, and Aboriginal heritage, and the history of our cameleers in the opening up of the outback is a very special one. Elders deserve special tribute for their dedication in keeping memories alive. We are grateful to all those descendants who have given their time today to be with us, and descendants in the front row here, as well as those who are speaking, who are up on stage. This project has been generously supported by the History Trust of South Australia, by the Migration Museum Foundation Committee, and Andrew and Joe Marshall, History Guardians of the History Trust of South Australia. Here's a phone. Thank you for the lovely, that was set up to remind us all not to have that focus today. And what a wonderful lunch we have enjoyed, thanks to Australian Sikh support, who are all identified by their printed T-shirts. And if you haven't had any of that, Tucker, there will be some afterwards, I believe, that you'll be able to partake in. A special thank you to all the volunteers. This project has been kindly and voluntarily arranged by Pamela and Elizabeth Ho, OAM, Keith Preston, Australian Migrant Resource Centre, and supporting the event today, a number of volunteers from the Amicus Global organisation. My name's Paul Rees. I'm the Head of Museums, Marketing and Major Events for the History Trust of South Australia. We are documenting and preserving this event today, and the content and memories have been made possible by the Migration Museum Foundation and will be a permanent record of cameleer history, which will be held by the History Trust of South Australia, and may and will eventually be turned into something you'll be able to see at the Migration Museum down the track. Thank you also for the music to Josh Bennett, who is playing, he's gone. He's playing the Indian violin. There he is over there, Indian violin, and I believe that's got another name, but I didn't commit it to memory. Josh, I'm sorry. Can you shout it out for us? Dilribba. Dilribba. And I was explaining too, that means the heart. To capture the heart. That's beautiful. We'll hear some more music soon. And our Afghan Australian musicians and performers, Farid and Shaheen, over here. Fantastic, beautiful music you were playing. Thank you. This event honours the memories and traditions of the cameleers from coast to outback. It recalls the great efforts of cameleers to transport essential goods to faraway places in South Australia and other parts of our nation. There were no cars back then. They weren't invented. There was no inland sea with boats or trains to do this. It was too hot and dry for bullocks and horses, just camels. Where did these skilled cameleers come from? Not one place. Some were from the lands we now refer to as Afghanistan, others from other South Asian locations, Baluchistan, the Punjab, northwest India, and among them both Sikhs and Muslims. This event is not rehearsed, and 10 speakers, eight speakers, will be giving us their stories and memories as if they were at a family gathering. This will be a real-life storytelling, like the instrument, from the heart. We expect the event to finish a little later than 4:30 p.m. Some of you may have arrangements, but if you have to, please move between the speaker segments, which I'll explain in a moment, so you don't disrupt the recording. Hopefully you can stay on after 4:30 and maximize your experience and from the formal event with a chance to speak to one or two of the descendants afterwards. And again, and have some of that lovely food that's on offer. Our volunteers will usher you to the conversation area, which most of you were in before, and we will bring this to a close, that element to a close at around 5:15. That's when we all close the doors. So imagine right now we are all around a campfire in the outback at a reunion, and we are sharing stories of the past. We, the audience, are very privileged to be here today. As I said, it's not a performance, it is a sharing moment. Moments. So we ask you to approach this experience in this way, and we invite you to be the attentive listeners. I do have a cold, so I just move it that way. Sniff and come back. There are some rules to share with you about this event. As I said, this is being officially recorded by the History Trust as a historical record. So please do not video, record, or photograph during the event. Also respect the need for quiet, so that voices of the descendants can be heard. This recording is being undertaken by our great team of History Trust curators, and thanks team, and you will see them going about this work during the event. Each speaker will speak for up to 10 minutes, and halfway through the first session, we'll have a short musical break of Afghan songs and instruments. As I said, you'll have a chance to talk to the descendants after the event, so please don't ask questions during these speaker presentation sessions. Each speaker has up to 10 minutes, I've already said that, and they're with us on the stage and they're ready to go, so I should get off. But also what I would ask is, no matter, it's going to be hard, no matter how inspiring the 10-minute discussion, what we're listening into, please don't applaud. Applaud once we finish the session, and if you're worried, I'll just get up and say, right, let's give them a round of applause before the music. So don't applaud during the different speakers, please. Just to keep the clean audio that we need. That's it. I think we're ready to go. Okay, we will... there's also toilet breaks. Now, it's going to be a long session. There will be an opportunity, obviously, when we don't want you to go when the music's playing, because the music's going to be great too, but that will be the opportunity if you're going to go to the toilet. If you're really busting and you need to go, the toilets are near the door where you came in, and they're very clearly marked. So if you are going to bustle out, do so really nice and quietly if you can. But if you can hold it in, we'll be very, very, very grateful. That'd be wonderful. So I think our first speaker, Keith, where's Keith? Yep, is Abdul Rahman Musha. And he's got the microphone, he's ready to go. I believe you come to the... That speaks from there? Right, sorry, you do speak from there, Abdul. Sorry, I got that wrong. Yes. Thank you. Yes. I might just pop out for a second and come back in.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Abdul Rahman Musha. I was born in Marree in 1935. I've got a twin brother called Raz Musha, which is not here today. I lived with my grandfather and grandmother in Marree. My grandfather came from Afghanistan. His name was Dadla Bluch, and I lived with him in Marree. While living with my grandfather in Marree, my grandfather came and went with the camels along the Birdsville track. I didn't see too much of him because I was only 11 years old when he started to work with the camels. And unfortunately, he passed away when I was 11 years old. So I don't really know too much about what happened to him and the camels. While living with my grandmother, I started school when I was 7 years old. But after my grandfather passed away, things just went from worse to bad. So living with my grandmother wasn't pretty hard. So one day she decided that she was going to make a fruit shop because money was scarce them days. There was no pensions, there was no money coming in. So eventually she made a fruit shop. So the first batch of fruit turned out good. So having that fruit shop was a blessing. I remember when I went to school, I came home every day and worked and helped her in the fruit shop, which was very good. But I can't really remember too much what happened, like I said, because I was only very young. But it was a bit of a struggle them days because things was pretty hard. But all I really can remember was what happened when when I came home from school in the shop, there's a fruit shop. Living with them was very good, but my grandfather was very sad when he passed away. I can remember when he was coming and going along the Birdsville track with the camels, but I can't really remember too much about him, but it was very sad the day he passed away. So living with my grandmother was very hard, but having worked with her in the fruit shop was not good. That was our lifesaver, working and living with the fruit shop. But there's not much I can really tell you about my life because I left school at 14 and then went to work at a place called Cow Springs. And I was away from Marree for 5 years. So coming back to 5 years working as a stockman out in the bush. But 5 years when I returned to Marree, I went back to live with my grandmother. And the first thing I was looking for when I got back to Marree was the fruit shop. But that had already been blown away. So there wasn't much left to do. When I got back to Marree, I worked on the railways for another 2 years. From there I left and went to Adelaide. But before I left Marree, I said goodbye to my grandmother. While saying goodbye to my grandmother, the first thing she said to me, "Can you still remember the fruit shop? Don't forget the fruit shop." I said, "I'll never forget the fruit shop because I worked on the scales in the fruit shop for 7 years while I was going to school." So after I said goodbye to her, out of her pocket she pulled out of her pocket, and she said to me, you will never forget the fruit shop, she said, because you worked in it all your life. So working out of her pocket, she pulled this out and gave me these. So this is the original scales what I worked on when I was 7 out in the fruit shop. That's about all I can remember. I've still got the scales from the fruit shop. So I'd like to just thank everyone for coming here today, and I would especially like to thank Pam for looking after our Afghan heritage, and I'd also like to thank Pam for being a great friend of all us Afghan descendants. Thank you. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Atul. Our next storyteller is joining Kundi.
Good afternoon, my name is Joylene Kundi and I'm here today with my sister Sue and cousins Deborah and Karen. We are descendants of Saeed Abdul Hassan, our great-grandfather. It was in the South Australian Advertiser in 1964 that he was reported as one of the last living camel drivers. He was in Adelaide on a quest to find the last of his friends and visited the mosque while he was here. Saeed Abdul Hassan was born on the 19th of February in Aden, Arabia. We have not been able to substantiate accurately the year of his birth, although it is reported that he died aged 104 years old. I think he may have been a lot younger than that. According to the article, he arrived in Australia in approximately 1899, 2 years before Queen Victoria died. I've not been able to find out which port he disembarked from. I've been told it was possibly Fremantle and that in 1901 he and Faisal Dean were the cameleers with the surveying party that surveyed the Western Australian rabbit-proof fence. He then travelled to Oodnadatta in South Australia, then to New South Wales, where he worked with camels in Broken Hill. He was a pack-string man who lived in the Broken Hill North Camel Camp and was collectively known as an Afghan. On some documents, he called himself Arab and was later known as Fred. Among 20 names of prominent camel men of Broken Hill, the name Hassan, nicknamed Fred, is among them. He carted pack saddles around Broken Hill and to Bourke. Saeed Abdul Hassan married Esther Susan Roff on the 24th of January in 1907 at the family residence in Bourke. He was 26 and Esther was aged 20, needing her father's permission to be married. Esther's father's name was Henry Burgess Roff and he was a carter. Hassan Sher Abdullah was the name recorded on the marriage certificate as Saeed's father. He was identified as a builder in Arabia but deceased at the time of their marriage. Miraj Gul from Afghanistan and a cameleer of the Broken Hill North Camel Camp was a witness at their wedding. Saeed Abdul Hassan and Esther Hassan had 10 children. They had 4 daughters. Miriam was born in Bourke on the 3rd of April 1908. Nora, Eileen, born in 1920, who later married Mr. Hoare, and Lila. They had 6 sons, Alf, Donald, William, known as Bunny, born on the 30th of January 1918 in Bourke. Raymond, known as Chocky, born on the 16th of October 1918 in Wilcannia. Elson, who was born on the 13th of August 1922 in Marree, and Reg, known as Akka, was born on the 28th of February 1925 in Port Augusta. My sister and I had met some of them when we were children, and I can only assume that our great-grandmother and her children became a transient family, given that their children were born in various outback locations, all born somewhere between Bourke and Port Augusta. In 1928, Saeed Hassan was employed making camel saddles at Hamilton Bore in Central Australia for 12 shillings a day. In April 1929, aged 50, Saeed Hassan was taken into custody by the Broken Hill Police for being suspected of murdering Muhammad Amin in Amin's house. Both were Afghan camel drivers who lived in the North Camel Camp. Saeed and Muhammad Amin knew each other in Western Australia earlier on. Muhammad Amin was born in Ghazni, Afghanistan, and one of the true Afghans in the Broken Hill camp. Another Afghan, Nasser Khan, was an eyewitness to the case. He told the police while Hassan watched the death struggles of Muhammad Amin, he said, "A good job you die. 2 days I want opium, and give me any." Both Hassan and Amin were opium users. Muhammad Amin died from strychnine poisoning. A case was heard in the Supreme Court of Broken Hill, and a Supreme Court judge was commissioned to hear the case. The jury returned a verdict of not guilty due to only circumstantial evidence, and Hassan was discharged. Later on, I found a quote in a book, Farina Gibbers to Ghost Town. When the postmaster was helping an Afghan scribe a telegram, he recognised Saeed's name and asked, "Are you the murderer from Broken Hill?" "Yes," was the response, "but I have been acquitted." Okay. During World War II, Saeed and Esther are recorded as living in various locations, including Adelaide and the Port Adelaide area, where their sons enlisted in World War II. It appears that Saeed continued trekking the outback of New South Wales and living in various locations in South Australia for a number of years. He then went to Alice Springs and lived there and died in Alice Springs on the 15th of November 1965 in the old timers' home, said to be aged 104. He is buried in the Alice Springs Memorial Cemetery in the Afghan section, and I have visited the grave site several times since I became interested in our Afghan heritage. Saeed and Esther's oldest child, Miriam Hassan, was our nana. When she was 16, she moved to Adelaide, where she worked as a housemaid. Her first son, Frederick Victor Leslie Hassan, was born in Alberton on the 18th of March in 1926. I'm not sure where she met Leslie James Hall, our grandfather, who was born in Adelaide 1910, but they were married in the courthouse on the 12th of November 1928 in Broken Hill. They had 8 children: Stanley, Clyde, George, John, Miriam, Raymond, known as Popeye, Leslie and Kenny, now known as Candy, all born in Broken Hill. Raymond Popeye Hall married Margaret Khan, daughter of Akbar Khan, and they lived in Lee Creek for most of their married life. George Ernest Hall's only children, Deborah White and Karen Theodore, are here today. My sister Sue Whitaker is also here today, and our dad was Leslie Barry Hall, but known as Barry. He also had 2 sons, Leslie, deceased, and Patrick. Our grandfather, Leslie James Hall, enlisted in the army in Broken Hill on the 18th of June 1940. He returned to Adelaide with Miriam and all 9 children, and he served in the 2nd 43rd Australian Infantry Battalion and was killed during a conflict in Egypt on the 17th of July 1942. Nana was left in Port Adelaide with 9 children. I know the children were somewhat separated for some time, and Nana moved around between Port Augusta, Broken Hill, Alice Springs and Darwin. Consequently, her children settled in various locations in South Australia, New South Wales and Northern Territory. Miriam Hall also was married to Mohammed Sultan for a short time, and they divorced in 1949. She later married Howard, known as Nookie Snagel, and they were married until he passed away on the 26th of January 1965. Nana moved around again and later settled in Alice Springs with her son, Fred Hassan. She passed away on the 27th of February 1990 and is interned in Darwin. Nana was also affectionately known as Biddy. Another son, Raymond Hassan, was nicknamed Chocky. He was a soldier in World War II and was a prisoner of war in Italy and Germany. He returned home a decorated serviceman. His marriage to Zelika Lil Fasala, daughter of Krashamoy and Zaidullah Fasala, was an arranged marriage. Chocky and Lil's children are Raymond, George, Lynette, Carl, Robert, who's here today, Ronnie and Judy. In the late 1970s, Uncle Chocky rode his camel from Kapunda to Broken Hill. Uncle Chocky and Auntie Lil moved to Gawler in their retirement years. Uncle Chocky passed away on the 6th of July 1991 and Auntie Lil on the 3rd of November 2019. They are both buried in the Williston Cemetery, but not together, as Uncle Chocky was buried as an ex-serviceman. Uncle Bunny, William, lived in Broken Hill. He also enlisted during World War II. He had active duty in Borneo and New Guinea. Uncle Bunny later moved to Gawler with his wife Norma and 2 children, Susan and Billy. He was a good stockman, but unfortunately died as a result of an accident where he was thrown from a horse on the 15th of April in 1972. Elson Hassan was a stockman who worked on Frome Downs Station. He also enlisted during World War II and served for 615 days. I do not know where he actively served, and he died on Waterloo Station on the 8th of December in 1959. Brothers and sisters, Uncle Akka, Uncle Reg and Auntie Lila lived together at Angle Vale for many years. Esther, our great-grandmother, lived there with them, as I understand that she and Saeed have been separated for some time. Esther, our great-grandmother, passed away on the 27th of October 1967 and was laid to rest in the Broken Hill Cemetery. Uncle Akka passed away on the 19th of May in 1972. As children, we had no idea that Saeed, Abdul, Hassan and so many other cameleers had played such an important part in connecting the major towns to the remote barren outback with essential food and goods to keep those towns alive. Those treks with the camel trains could only have been done by men with absolute determination against the harsh conditions to complete the weeks and months-long journeys in a foreign country. The Gan is aptly named in honour of these amazing men and their families. As adults, we have a sense of pride given that his story is not just about our family history, but it is interwoven into the early history of Australia. And I have sourced this information from births, deaths and marriages in New South Wales and South Australia, Genealogy SA, the National Archives of Australia, Australian War Memorial, various newspapers and books, and thanks Pamela as well. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jolie. Our next storyteller is two, Carol and David Hamilton. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Our descendant, David's grandfather, we know as Mujahideen. We believe he was born somewhere in the Indian subcontinent and left from Karachi. We think he was born about 1873. His surname may have been Baradeen. We have 2 surnames in the family because when Mr. Mujahideen died, his half-brother married the widow and took on the children. When Mr. Mujahideen came to Australia, we're not sure whether he came through Western Australia or South Australia, but he does appear in the newspapers in Coolgardie, near Kalgoorlie in Western Australia, in 1896. There was a dispute with several other Afghans about a payment of fines or money owing to one of the employers. Then he appears in 1901 in Coward Springs, Mount Eba in South Australia. He was a partner to a man called Gulbadine, who they were based in Coward Springs. Both the men married sisters. So our Mr. Mujahideen married Clara Window, and his partner Gulbadine married her sister Mary Window. Mujahideen married Clara in the Methodist manse in Port Augusta in 1903 when he was 30 years old and she was 17. The same year, their son Jack Ajibdeen was born in Port Augusta, and then 2 years later, another son, Ghulam Muhammad, was born in Port Augusta West. Clara was 19 and Mujahideen was 32. The next we know of them is they've moved to Western Australia, to Coolgardie. We don't know whether they sailed on a ship or came across land. But the young boy, the youngest of the two boys, passed away in Coolgardie when he was less than a year old, and he's buried in the Coolgardie Cemetery, which in the area of Western Australia, when people of Muslim tradition died, they went to Coolgardie. Whether they lived in Kalgoorlie or anywhere else, Coolgardie was the cemetery for them.
Way at the back.
Yes, number 25. Then moved to a place called Leonora, which is north of Kalgoorlie. A lot of Afghans lived there. Out of town, about 10 kilometres, there's a dam called Malcolm Dam. It's probably about the only water source around there. And they have market gardens. So Mujahideen and Clara grew vegetables, and he had a cart and he'd take them into town, into Leonora, and sell them to people around town. Unfortunately, he was charged with horse stealing, and at the age of 33 to 35 was incarcerated in Fremantle jail and left Clara alone with the rest of the family to look after. When he came back to Leonora, while he was away, another son was born. But when he came back to Leonora after his prison sentence, he had a daughter, Violet Zuleika, and each of the children had a Christian name of an anglicised name, and then they had a Muslim name as well. So David's mum was Violet Zuleika, and she was born in 1908. There is an entry in one of the newspapers that they were granted a garden area in 1909 in Malcolm Dam, growing their vegetables, and he was delivering them as well. There were quite a few other Afghan people there doing the same type of thing, all working as hawkers, where they'd have a cart and go and sell kitchen goods, I guess, to the women that are around the area, as well as stations. Another son, Frederick Fazaldine, was born in 1911, still in Leonora, and another son, Gul Hassan, was born in Leonora. Another son, 1915, Dude Gulab William, was born in Leonora, and then 1916, when he was 43 years old, Mujahideen died. We're not sure what he died of, but the entry in the paper was he collapsed while doing greengrocery around with Dr. McCall attended, but the illness was fatal. He had been ailing for some time, but not thought to be serious. So at the time of his death, he was 43 and Clara was 30 with quite a few children. And in the Muslim tradition, not that he was very religious, but it was the Muslim tradition, so they took his body to Coolgardie Cemetery He was buried there with a number 25 on his grave, and in the top northwest corner was where all the Mujahideen were buried. After he died, there was a tradition, we're not quite sure exactly what it's called, but we've got a couple of people who have given us some information. The unmarried brother of the deceased would be requested to marry the widow and take over her children, in which case that happened, and then the half-brother Barradine married the widow, took on their children, took the family down to Perth, and they all lived there for the rest of the parents' life anyway, and they had another 4 children. He went back to Mecca. This is Mr. Barradine, twice, I think. He had a family still in India or Pakistan, but his first wife had died. So there's obviously a family there that are half brother and sisters to some of our Barradine relations here. And Mr. Mujahideen died at sea on his way back from his second trip to Mecca. And Clara, the mother, the wife, died at age 64 and is buried in Perth in the Muslim cemetery. But I gather from a lot of the research we've done, those early cameleers would have been very hardy men, and the women that were accompanying them or keeping house would have had to endure very hostile conditions in the outback. And they obviously went to service a lot of the stations in Queensland, New South Wales, South Australia, Northern Territory, where bullocks and horses just couldn't get through. And I guess the camels stayed until mechanisation of trucks, and then the camels were no longer required, and that's why I think Mujahideen and lots of others moved on to try and get jobs as hawkers or selling grocers, whatever, anything they could do if they had married and had family in Australia. If they didn't, I guess a lot of them went back to India or those areas. So thank you very much Barbara, for all your help, and we've enjoyed seeing lots and lots of the descendants and hearing different voices from different parts of the world. So let's continue with the stories.
I'm the other half of the famous partnership here, David Hampton. My grandfather was Mr. Mujahideen there, a fine-looking gentleman, and he married an Australian lady, Clara Window, in Port Augusta, and that was my grandmother. I never met him. He was long gone when I came around. So one of the speakers talked about not knowing their grandfather or father much. Well, I had no idea of him. Even the widow married Mr. Barradine, my grandfather's half-brother, we think his half-brother, and as a kid, I can only remember a rather frightening kind of guy with brown skin and a turban, and I probably only met him once or twice, so I'm unfortunately kind of a bit young to have been involved there, but that's my dear mother there. She was a remarkable woman. Fantastic lady, just strong and brought the family up very well. But it was interesting that the deal with my grandmother was that the girls had a Christian name, an English Christian name, but an Indian second name. So my mother was Violet Zuleika. The boys had Indian / Muslim names, which they almost all abandoned as they got older. The only one who probably kept close to his Indian Muslim name was the youngest son, Mam. We called him Uncle Mam, but he's Mahmood. He was close. Others who had names such as Uncle Jack, who's in the photo there, the first born, he was Mohammed, and I knew him as Uncle Jack. And others just anglicised their names to make it, I guess, easier in the community at that time. The other kind of interesting aspect of my uncles is I think they all went to jail, which is terrific. And I can, as a kid with my lovely mum, I can just remember going to the old Fremantle jail to see one of her brothers, Uncle Dude, again an anglicised kind of a name, in that prison area. And years later, when they opened up the Fremantle prison, we went back and we were able to go into that area where visitors could meet the inmates, and I was back as a young kid kind of seeing my uncle in the jail. But it was just lovely to think of my grandmother lived a longer life after her two husbands had died, and then she ended up moving into our house, my mother's house in Maylands, and I just remember her as a old white-haired lady, and she died in that house, but had a lovely, happy life. Thank you. Are we going to have is that the fourth speaker?
I'm for.
We have our fourth speaker now.
Yeah.
Thank you, Carol and David. Our last speaker for this session is Nicole Curtis and Louise Hattie.
Thank you. Hi, my name's Nicole. This is my sister Lois. Lois has got some pictures that she will show of our grandfather. We believe that you can't look forward until you know where you come from. We've researched our history and our hearts to find what being a descendant of an Afghan cameleer means to us. We're the youngest two of 5 siblings to our father, who was an only child. His father passed away before we were born. Along with the surname change, he came out to Australia and his name was Atta Khan. When he came back to Australia, he had done his pilgrimage in Mecca and was then known as Haji Atta. With the surname change to Hattie occurred when our father started school, and we wondered where the ancestry name of Hattie ever came from. So it inspired a curiosity in our family history. Also with that, my sister Lois had the strongest Afghan appearance in our family. Her skin was very olive. She has faded over the years. Anyway, and so she was often questioned throughout her life as to her ethnic background. So naturally, she wanted to find out more about our heritage and where our roots were. So it was this voyage of discovery that Lois uncovered quite a lot of our history. Atta Khan was our grandfather. He came to Australia in the late 1880s. He was recruited by Abdul Wade and entered Australia via Port Augusta. His work on the camel trains took him between Broken Hill and Bourke. Later, Atta Khan made his pilgrimage to Mecca and returned as Haji. Upon his return in 1908, he met and married an Irish descendant in Bourke, New South Wales. After much opposition from his future bride's family, including a court case that was trying to prevent their marriage, eventually that went nowhere because my grandmother wouldn't testify against him. Her mother was opposed to the marriage, which was the reason behind the court case. They did get married, and then after a couple of years, the couple moved to Broken Hill, where they settled into the community. Hadji practiced his beliefs. He had the privilege of being able to participate in halal prayers and in funeral rites. He spoke English very well and would act as an interpreter for his countrymen if required. Broken Hill townspeople who have remembered him have told us that he was well respected and supportive of his countrymen and their traditions. He was a generous man of strong moral character. Our grandfather gave us a start by allowing us to grow up in the outback town of Broken Hill. It is because of him that we as a family have developed a love and strong affection for this land. We are proud to call ourselves descendants of an Afghan cameleer, as the Afghans, as they were colloquially known, I know they were coming from many different areas, worked together to open up Australia during horrendous weather conditions and adversity of not being truly welcome to this land. They worked tirelessly in the exploration of this country, in supplying the lifeblood to the struggling stations and setting up vital inland telecommunications. Our grandfather worked on camel strings throughout SA and New South Wales. He eventually began training camels and horses. He was a modest man who did not seek any accolades for his community work. He was a part of Australia's colonial history, which should be remembered and valued. We are proud of Hadji Atta and his achievements. We have concerns that this part of our Australian history, and thus our family history, will be lost for future generations. Which it's great to see so many people here today, showing that if we all speak up, people will continue this. And thank you, Pam. We're happy to answer any questions after these proceedings. Thank you so much all.
Thank you very much, everybody.
My turn, is it?
Oh,
Nicole and Louise, that's okay. Thank you very much, Nicole and Louise. You might be curious as well to understand this project continues tomorrow. You can think of this component that you're witnessing today as the public airing of some stories. Our curators will meet with some of the descendants tomorrow and do some more in-depth, non-public sort of story sharing that will be further documented. So just to let you know what you're part of. It's sort of part A today, which is the sharing publicly, and later. So as we spoke, we're going to take a short break. We're going to before we throw to them to the musicians and Josh and Farid and Shaheen. Would you just put your hands together, please, for the speakers so far? Thank you, Farid, Shaheen, and Josh. Let's do one more round of applause. That's wonderful music. Thank you very much. Okay, we are up to our second session, where we're going to hear 4 more stories. And the first is Bobby and Janet Shamrose.
Can you hear me? Salam alaikum, everyone. My name is Amanullah Robert Shamrose. I'm the son of Shamrose Khan, Afghan cameleer who came to Australia in the late 1890s from Peshawar to work with the camels. He worked with camels between Victoria, Adelaide, Port Augusta and Broken Hill. Shamrose Khan had worked on the railway line between Tarcoola and Port Augusta, shifting camps water and sleepers with the camels. I only found out about that recently. And he was also a camel dealer in Port Augusta, which I didn't know, and selling camels and camel saddles and wagons through Dalgetty's company. He would offer to bring the camels to Coburn if anyone in Broken Hill was interested in buying them. He was trying to get enough money to go back to India. Whether he went back or not, I don't know. I'm going to hand you over to my beautiful wife.
Where's it to?
Yeah, there.
Sorry, I won't be a moment. I've got to turn the page. After the camels finished in 1930, my father came back to Broken Hill and worked as a hawker, travelling all over the back country, visiting the stations around Broken Hill and selling his gear. He then worked on the British mine Broken Hill, also worked as an interpreter for the Broken Hill courts. The last job my father worked as was shovelling coal at the Civilton tramway for 9p a tonne. He done that until just before he died in 1952, aged 75. In the 30s, he married Miriam Begum Fazala, daughter of Zaidullah Fazula, another cameleer. They had 3 children, Roseanne, Rahmatullah, and me, Aminullah. When I was born in 1940, my mother's 24 and my father was, we're not sure if he was 60 or 62. I was the youngest. He lived in the camel camp at 724 Chapel Street, Broken Hill North, with my grandfather and grandmother, and many uncles and aunties lived just down the 2 doors down. For me, I heard many stories of the old cameleers that still lived in the camel camp at that time. I still remember the Afghans gathering at the old Broken Hill Mosque and chatting in their language. I remember they would give us boys lollies, fruit and cold boiled eggs. Our family is still linked through marriage to other cameleer families, the daughters of Zaidullah Fazula and Krasha Maud. My mother, Miriam Fazala, married Shamroz Khan. Gulana married Ahmed Teddy Khan, son of Akbar Khan. Bibi married Jack, son of Bijar Dervish. Jamal married Lal Sultan, son of Sultan Muhammad. Zalika married Ray Hassan, son of Said Hassan. Bakhtora married Abdul Aziz, son of Sultan Aziz, and his son Rasul married Nazmina, granddaughter of Namath Khan. I'm a proud caretaker of the old Broken Hill Mosque and have been there for the past 16 years. We have many visitors from all over the world, include descendants of cameleers looking for information of their ancestors. We had groups of Muslims come from all over Australia, come and visit the mosque and pray. My wife Janet and I, daughters Debbie, Julian and son Randall, 7 grandchildren, 11 great-grandchildren are all very proud of our beautiful big Afghan family. Thank you.
Oh, I'll introduce myself. Hello everybody, I'm Jane Cader. My great-grandfather, who I sadly never met, on the paternal side was Sheikh Abdul El Qadir. Now, sometimes he's called Cader, which is, I kept the name all my life, Kader, but that was the anglicised version. Often you see it on letters written as Kadir, I think, which is more correct. Sometimes it was Khadir. And El of Qadir. So family law says that that he came from a tribe of traders, Qadir the traders, and they went all up through in Pakistan, modern day Pakistan, which of course was northern India, and through Afghanistan and also through into Tibet, and they traded goods. And when in the early days in Australia, family law says there's no written record of this, that he brought goods to Australia, and he went back many times to northern India, and he went to Mecca 3 times. Obviously, many of them went to Mecca, and hence that's why he was a sheikh. And he bought goods such as beautiful carpets and basketry and homeware goods, and he brought them to Australia in the early part of the 20th century. And the story goes, at some point, the Australian government put an embargo on the goods coming in, foreign goods. Sound familiar? And that sort of destroyed his business. And then he sought other things to do. So that's all family law, but nothing written down about that. Interesting, when we looked into, you go on Ancestry, he was born to a Parsi family. He converted to Mohammedanism later. He was born to Ormaz Dadaboy Sukhia in Karachi, India, now Pakistan, in 1879. And Dadaboy's wife was called Shernbar. Now, there's some discrepancy because in the book called, I think it's called Australian Cameleers, it says that he was born 20 years earlier than that. And also some information I've found says that he died an old man. So it's possible that he wasn't born in 1879, but 20 years earlier, but I can't be sure on that. As I said, they were Parsis, and at some point he did convert. So he came in his mid-teens, and he was, at the time he came here, he was known as Ormaz. And he came to Perth, Western Australia, in 1895. By 1907, he had found a woman he wished to marry called Sybil Rose Marsh, and her father was a civil engineer from London, but she was living in Western Australia. They soon had 2 boys. The first one was called Rustam. He was born in 1907. The family story states that that when my great-grandfather took the boys back to India several times, at one point Rustam died in a terrible accident and drowned in the River Ganges. He was only 12 or 13. So that left my grandfather, the youngest son, whose name was Leonard Cader. And that grandfather, of course, I remember fondly. I never met the sheikh, but I remember my grandfather very well. And he looked very Indian. He was an interesting man, quite a broken man because he'd been to war. He was an Australian soldier. He was one of the rats of Tobruk. He saw untold horrors in his war years, which affected him, I think, for life, which must have done for many, many men. And he also went to New Guinea. And he was, he'd had that background in India as a young man where he went back and forth with his brother and father. And at some point, the marriage ended. I can't work out when, because the mother remarried at some point. And possibly my great-grandfather did as well. But those early formative years in India, he loved poetry, and you might be familiar with Omar Khayyam, the poems of Omar Khayyam, very famous historical poet. And he wrote poems in that vein, and I have a whole lot of them here. This is my grandfather we're talking about now, from his early years with his father in India. He also was a painter. So he brought some of that culture into his life here in Australia. Now, just give me 2 seconds here. Now, my great-grandfather, the Sheikh Abdul, we'll call him now because he did convert in possibly World War I, 1920s, converted to Mohammedanism. He was described in a lot of articles as a linguist and an interpreter. And he was an advocate for the Afghan and Indian people that came here. Now, a number of them were illiterate. they were not only illiterate in English, which is understandable, but possibly in their own language as well when they came here. So he helped them in the courts, and he helped them with their paperwork. I did meet a lovely Aboriginal woman last time we had a gathering, and she said that my great-grandfather's name was the celebrant on her parents' wedding. She was part Afghanistan and part Aboriginal. But it was interesting that, that his name was on there. So he did a lot in the courts, and he was quite well known in the courts, and he did a lot to help. I think he contributed to the building of the mosques, certainly the one at Hergot Springs, up near Marree, I believe. He contributed to the building of that mosque, and he also planted one of the early date plantations up there. Don't know if it's still there. People that up from that way might know. Possibly it's gone. He also helped with the Adelaide Mosque and the construction of that. Or perhaps not the construction, but certainly he was involved in it and helped out with it. I wanted to read you this very interesting article, which I thought was quite amusing. It's from the newspapers, possibly late 20s, early 1930s, because he used to represent other Afghani or Indian people in the courts. So this is probably from the Adelaide Advertiser. It's a bit yellow, as you can see. So it's District Court News. Afghans insurance policy, house burnt down, company denies liability. So nothing much changes, does it? A tall, majestic Afghan with head turbaned, booming out, "I am Sheikh Abdul Qadir," caused somewhat of a stir in the district court yesterday, and was reminiscent of the sheikhs of filmdom. This has been in the silent movie times. The Afghan, with his arms folded, solemnity personified, acted as an interpreter in a case in which Juma Khan proceeded against the Bankers and Traders Insurance Company to recover £350 allegedly due on his house. In his opening address, Mr. Newell pointed out that the man who was illiterate and a foreigner was forced to rely on the agent of the insurance company. This was the case with Jama Khan. So he's sort of called a foreigner who's probably working here for some years. With stern sincerity, Sheikh Abdul Qadir stepped up to the witness box and, seizing the green clothed Bible in his hand, pressed it to his forehead and cheeks. Judge Bevan caused some amusement by remarking that all the Afghans seemed to take the oath differently. The number of kisses and where the book was placed varied considerably. He supposed it was all right. Captain Storkey protested against an interpreter being used, but in vain. The Afghan, Sheikh Abdul Qadir, said he lived in Adelaide and had been throughout the Commonwealth in his capacity as interpreter. He spoke fluent English of the learned, not the sheikh type. And when Mr. Newell asked him when Khan, in inverted commas, turned up to the insurance office, his face was blank until the word arrive was substituted. He did not know Australian slang. So he spoke proper English, is basically what they're saying. So I thought that was quite an amusing little article about him. I thought I'd share with you. As I said, he worked consistently with the migrants. And talking to the descendants this morning, some of whom I've met before, many of these cameleers would have known each other and worked together and possibly been friends or would have met up at different times along the various routes and things that they did. So he sadly died before I was born in Heidelberg, Victoria in 1941. And I didn't get to meet him, but he sounds like a very interesting person, and I have a number of photographs and articles about him. So thank you.
Thank you, Jane. And also thank you, Bobby and Janet, for your earlier contribution as well. The next speaker, the next storyteller, is Patsy Brown.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is a story of my dad, Gul Muhammad. This is the story of the life of the last known Afghan descent in the Northern Territory. The story is in the memory of a great pioneer of the outback, Gul Muhammad, who was born 77 years ago and who passed away on the 22nd of May 1985. He was the eldest son of Pir Muhammad of the earliest pioneer cameleers, who helped open up the great expanse of South Australia and the Northern Territory in 1872. Pir Muhammad came from Peshawar and journeyed to South Australia with his own team of camels. In the early days, he carried food, building supplies, petrol, kerosene, and even a piano, I think, at one stage, to the workers of the Overland Telegraph Line, and later during the construction of the East-West Line. Pir Muhammad met and married Ruby Stewart, a lass from Scotland. They had 7 children, 4 girls and 3 boys. Unfortunately, Ruby was accidentally killed in a shooting accident at the age of 27. The children had to be cared for by the housekeeper at their father's home in Beltana in South Australia. Gul had to leave school to help his father with the camel teams, loading and unloading them, and a long journey up and down the Birdsville and Innaminka track. Remembering there were no mod cons those days, and for the young lad of 12, this was a big responsibility. From the age of 6, Gul loved to be with the camels and always helped his father bring them in, so as a teenager he was an experienced camel man. The team, being 70 to 75 camels, travelled about 25 miles a day, settling around 9:30 a.m. each morning and not stopping until nightfall. It was a long job. The men walked beside their camels all day, checking the loads. Then they had to be unloaded each night and brought back to the camp in the morning to start the process once again. Gul's first trip from Alice Springs to Oodnadatta was with his father in 1922. Pia had done the trips earlier without his son. After their first trip together, they did many more together up and down the track. In 1926, Pia retired and Gul took over the team, carting all over South Australia and into the Northern Territory. After the railway was completed in 1929, Oodnadatta to Alice Springs line, there were no more need for camel trains, so the cameleers set their camels free, and the camels of today are their direct descendants. Gul then worked as a boundary rider and stockman until he joined the railways in 1932 and was a ganger. Gul and his crew kept the trains running when there were washaways, buckled lines, any problems that would have held the trains up. They knew how to repair anything and done it the hard way without the modern equipment of today. In 1934, Pir Muhammad moved to Alice Springs and opened up a general store with other old Afghans, Akbar Khan in Hartley Street. The site is now where the Overlander Steakhouse stands. Later, Pir decided to move back to South Australia to be near his family. He died in 1942, aged 93. Gee, I might live that long, mightn't I? and is buried in Port Augusta. Muhammad Street in Alice Springs is named after him. Gul married Miriam Khan, and from that marriage they had a son and a daughter who both live in Port Augusta. Dean Muhammad is a well-known police officer there. In 1949, Gul remarried in South Australia, a South Australian lass he met in Alice Springs. They had a daughter now living in Western Australia. That's me. In the early 1950s, as he was a boring contractor working around the outback stations and the hot and dry deserts, in 1953 he rejoined the Commonwealth Railways in Alice Springs and built a shed and a tent behind the loco shed not far from where the new railway station stands today. And Gul and his wife and daughter lived there until the new railway homes were built, and he was the first one to occupy them. A few years later he rose from ganger to train examiner. Gould was also an officer of the St John's Ambulance Brigade in Alice Springs for many years and an officer of the Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. In 1964, Gould and his wife Ida bought 10-acre farm in Hebertree Gap where sick and injured animals were taken. He was a lifelong member of the Buffalo Lodge where many medals were acquired. In 1968, Gould was transferred to the Northern Australian Railways in Darwin and instructed many recruits, teaching the Westinghouse brake system. He retired from the railways in 1973. Gould and his third wife toured Australia. On returning, brought the Mataranka Hotel Motel. After a few years, they sold that and ran the Stanley Chasm kiosk. Gould and Noel Fullerton were asked to make a film called Canellan's Camels. Gould played the part of the mailman. When Princess Alexander opened the tar cooler to Alice Springs line in October in 1980, Gould was asked again to ride camels for the documentary film. With this event, both films have been shown worldwide. In 1980, Gould and his wife returned to 5-acre blocks south of Alice Springs, where he kept a few pet camels and grew the biggest watermelons I've ever seen. To this day, to the day he died, camels always took first place. He taught so many people the art of breaking and handling them and making the saddles. The Whiteman Museum in Guildford in Western Australia has an original saddle made by Gould on display. Be an old salad, wouldn't it? He was closely associated with the Alice Springs Camel Cup and was official judge on more than 4 occasions. He was a man with a very big, generous, kind heart. I know, as I am his daughter, and would like to thank all the people who helped with this story in not letting die the memory of a great man. I hope you have enjoyed reading this story. I have a book out in the out there for everyone to have a look at, all the photos of my dad and his camels. And yes, thank you for listening.
Thank you, Patsy. And our last speaker for this session is none other than Janice Noyce.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A lovely afternoon. It's lovely to see such a crowd of people and so many descendants here today. And so I am also a Mohammed. Patsy is my cousin. Our fathers were brothers. My father was John and Patsy's father was Gould. And of course they were both sons of Pir Muhammad. Now I'm going to give you a short talk on the history of these men. They came out from their various towns, whatever part of the country they came from. They travelled near and far. They came out on boats, the boats taking 3 months to get here, and you imagine travelling in a boat for 3 months with camels. My grandfather came out with his own team. Other gentlemen had their own camels, and you imagine, as I said, you imagine those people, those men, they were not allowed to bring out their wives. They had to come out to this country and do something and travel great distances to carry the loads that they did. They carried from mules of cotton, flour, sugar. They had to carry water. There was no petrol stations. There was no electric cars. Nothing had worked. The horses, the donkeys, the bullocks, they could not go the distances and the lengths that they had to travel. Those lengths, those distances were too great for those animals. And so Sir Thomas Elder and his friend Charles Stuckey, they went and brought out the camels to Australia, and that's how the camels came to be, because they were brought out with their handlers, of course, as I said, in the hull of a boat, and they came out. Some of them could talk their own language, some of them could understand a bit of English, some of them could not do much of either. And over the other side of the table would be somebody who couldn't understand what the Afghan was saying, so sometimes the names of these men were misspelt. Now, as I said earlier, they travelled such great distances. Now, they had no, what we call in the cars these days, the, what do you call those, you know, press the button and, no GPSs. They had no GPSs. All they had was the sun, the moon, the stars, a compass and a Quran, their Bible, because they were all, not all Muslims, some of them were Sikhs, and so it went on. They weren't all Muslims, they all never had the same Bible, but whatever it was, that was their belief. They came out here, as I said, to a vast country, and so they worked. And how many times did they work? From one station to another. They would leave Farina or Marree or anywhere that they were travelling from and travelling to, loading up, unloading day and night, and not riding the camel, because if they rode the camel, that would be a waste of money, because that camel could be loaded. So therefore, they could take a bigger load. Now, some of the loads were only small, some of the camel strings were not very long, and others were very, very long. And all those camels went from one to the other to the other. And that was the form of a camel string. And so the Afghan, he walked, because if he rode that animal, as I said earlier, then there would be less equipment that he could take to the station where he was going, and he had to travel with all that was ordered, and so he left his destination and he carried on until he got to where he was to deliver all this equipment. Sometimes he was shortchanged because, oh, well, the old Gan, he's too silly, he don't know nothing. So, but he never had any prejudice against people. He just remembered them, but he knew who was who and who would be respective of him, his cultures, because what did the Australians think when they saw these men with their pantaloons on and their top, which was a kameez, and their turban on their head? They must have looked a weird group of men. But these men, they were helping South Australia. They were in every state, even as far down as Tasmania, and wherever they were stationed or they lived, they went about and they did their work. They were very hard-working men in very hard conditions, without any help. And there again, as I said, they came with what they had. They got nothing when they came. There was no Centrelink. There was no money. Nobody could give them a handout. They had a very, very hard life. But while they had a hard life, they certainly made it a lot easier for us. Now we look at them as our family, and you've heard stories of the families here today. I thank my fellow people who have spoken today of their families. But we all remember the Afghan cameleers, and so we hope that today has given you an enlightenment of what our ancestors did, and that's why we feel that our government should acknowledge, appreciate and accept that who the Afghan cameleers were. They were the instigators, the beginning of the transport industry of Australia. And that's what our ancestors did. They started the transport industry of Australia, and we should not ever forget that, because that was all done by our ancestors. I thank you for the afternoon.
Thank you, Janice. That's a wonderful way to wrap up. Wonderful, you sort of a great summation and a great call to action as well for us all and our government. We're now at the end of the formal event, and as I mentioned earlier, and I'll say again, this is the first part of a storytelling weekend, which has been documented by our curators, and tomorrow we'll continue with further conversations. Speaking of conversations, if you'd like to hang around a bit, you can. The descendants will be making their way towards... Yeah, they'll be moving towards another room, and you can come and have an informal chat. I won't repeat the thank yous I gave at the beginning. We will just say a giant thank you to our audience. The performers, the music, they're not. We know they're in spirit, and the volunteers and everyone that gave today. Please make it possible. We do a round of applause, please. Thank you. Before we close out with just a quick gift, we won't be just quite leaving. There is another event. So the History Festival of South Australia presents the South Australia's History Festival 2025. Please partake. I see a few people in the audience who've already been to a couple of our events already. It goes for the whole month of May. It's the South Australia's History Festival, not History Month, but we do celebrate it for a whole month. There is another event that's happening, which might be of interest to this audience. It's run by the Royal Geographic Society. It's Triumph and Tragedy, Early Decisions That Shaped South Australia. I am led to believe there is a strong element of some historical figures and materials that you can view which are related to the Afghan cameleers, which might be worth looking at. So check it out in page 29 of the program or online. But to close our speakers, our speakers deserve our special thanks, and to honour them, I would like to call on the chair of the Migration Museum Foundation and also the chair of the History Trust of South Australia, Liz Ho OAM, to present some wonderful certificates in memory of today. Thank you.
I'm handing certificates of appreciation to all of our speakers. I think they have honoured us today with information that has been rather hidden, and I think they deserve enormous praise for coming all the way here to share with us. I'd also just like to mention that someone has joined us, Josephine Marshall, and she doesn't want me to say anything, but she and Andrew actually donated the hire of the hall. So we thank you very much, Josephine. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz.
Abdul, I don't know where he's born.
Audience members are welcome to just stay while we, or not stay, but we'll just hand these out. Audience members are welcome to gather and talk in the Conversations exhibition area at the dining room, and there is some food still available for those who missed out or want seconds or want more. As I mentioned, the doors will close around 5:15. We will need to chuck you all out at that point. I really do appreciate you attending today, and the History Trust thanks you for your participation and your diligence. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for coming. Thank you.
Very proud group of people. It was lovely to see.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for coming.